In today's Go Tanium Tech Talk, I'm going to interview again our SME lead, our subject matter expert who leads all the other subject matter experts, Joel Gordon. I'm going to talk to him about what's new in Tanium Comply 2.11 and 2.12. There are some big features you asked for, and you're going to get to see them today. Welcome back to Go Tanium Tech Talks. I'm your host, Ashley McGlone, and Tanium Comply is our module for vulnerability and configuration scanning, and it is super popular with our customers. But before we get into what's new today, a couple quick things. Converge registration is now open, so be sure to hop on over to converge.tanium.com to sign up early for our hybrid in-person event this November 14th to the 17th in Austin, Texas. Hope to see you there live. It is hybrid. You can attend remotely or in person, either one. So Joel Gordon is my guest today. He's our SME lead for Comply, our subject matter expert. So Joel, welcome back to the show. And for those who didn't meet you last time, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Great to be back. My name is Joel Gordon. I'm a technical account manager here at Tanium. And as you mentioned, I am the lead Comply subject matter expert. So working with all of our other TAMs in the field, technical account managers, our customer success folks, to help our customers implement and operationalize Comply in their environments.
So some people watching this show is probably the first time they've ever seen Comply. A lot of folks, though, are old hat at this. Just really quickly, could you just give us a really quick skinny on what is Comply and what are some of the biggest value use cases our customers get out of it?
In a nutshell, what Comply as the solution provides to our customers is the ability to monitor in near real time vulnerabilities in their environment as well as compliance misconfiguration. So, when we look at a lot of the emerging issues that are, challenging a lot of our enterprises today, we always seem to see a new ransomware attack, a new vulnerability that's being exploited out in the wild. And one of the biggest challenges that large organizations have, or really any size organization, is understanding where you have those vulnerabilities, right? Where you have those gaps in your hygiene, in your environment, and what you can do to fix them. And really it starts by identifying the problems, right? So Comply allows you to find where you have, vulnerable software in your environment. Maybe your patch management process is lagged behind, and maybe you have some old, CVEs from a couple years back that are still in the environment that might still be, real vulnerabilities that can open you up to attackers in your environment. And then on the compliance side of it, this is where you're able to track your compliance against what we call secure benchmarks, right? Or standards. So in most cases for our customers, they're going to be using what is going to be called the CIS, or Center for Internet Security. CIS puts out benchmarks for various operating systems and applications. We also support DISA-STIGs, right? So for our Fed customers, and what Comply allows you to do is to operationalize this at the speed and scale of Tanium using our platform to be able to get that visibility into your environment and then pivot to remediation of those issues.
And today what we want to do is go through what's new in Comply. So now we got a little bit of an overview. I don't think we've talked about Comply 2.11 either. It's been a while since we've done a show on Comply. Yeah. And then we got Comply 2.12 that just dropped. So I'd like to hear a little bit of both of those to catch us up on what's the latest in the world of Comply.
We've been really busy here at Comply. I was thinking, I probably could use some notes here just to make sure that we know all of the things and we've covered all the things. Last time when we talked, we were at Comply 2.10, getting ready to release Comply 2.11. The big thing in the Comply 2.11 release for our customers was adding the ability to do remote authenticated scans, right? So for most of our customers, or most people who are familiar with Comply, we have been doing compliance and vulnerability scanning using the Tanium agent across the board for endpoints that we manage, right? So if there's a Tanium client, you can put it on an endpoint. We allow you to do those compliance and vulnerability scans. But you have many use cases for being able to, measure your vulnerability and compliance posture on devices where you can't put a Tanium client on. Think about things like ESXi hypervisors, for example, or Cisco network equipment. And so that was the big push to get RAS out for customers so that they can complete that visibility into their environment to see where they have, vulnerabilities and compliance misconfigurations on those kind of devices as well. One of the cool use cases there as well for RAS is, even if it is a device that you could put a Tanium client on, but maybe it's an oversubscribed, under provisioned endpoint, something like a VDI, or maybe it's something that, you're sensitive to putting additional workloads on. Remote authenticated scanning is another use case there where you can go out and set up scans from what we call the Tanium satellite. So satellite is one of the newer shared services that we have, and Discover was the first module to leverage it. So we then took that, our integration with Discover, and allowed customers to be able to set up these satellites as their designated scanning nodes to carry out these workflows for the remote authenticated scan. So that was really the big thing in 2.11. And the other thing I'll talk about a little bit is what we call our client extension integration, which was also something that was new in 2.11.
So the remote authenticated scanning, RAS, right? I'd always thought about the VMware, the Citrix, or not the Cisco, VMware and Cisco use cases. But what you just explained really, it's the first time I've heard that use case, and it makes a lot of sense. Scanning under resourced endpoints like VDI. That's a perfect use case. I'd not even thought of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things where, when you're dealing with environments where you have all kinds of, endpoints that are, in certain cases, you might have end user endpoints that are very low resource, don't have a whole lot to give as far as adding additional clients and agents on it. And I think one of the things that we see in a lot of environments is that there are no shortage of toolings on endpoints, right? Whether it's your security tools or your operations tools. So, that's always been one of the great value props of Tanium is that, we do all this with a single agent, but now we're extending that capability out to where all you need to do is set up a satellite in the environment. That satellite just needs to have line of sight to the remote targets, right? So, you've got your routing in place, the firewall rules, and then you can go out and you can have that satellite handle the workload, target those remote endpoints, and still give you back the value as if, you were running a client-based scan. So we're using the same content, we're using the same vulnerability definitions, the same compliance benchmarks from CIS and DISA. You can go ahead and operationalize those in a remote authenticated fashion.
Now, I know the first question that's on people's mind is, this was the first release of RAS. We're doing VMware and Cisco. What's on the, and again, not holding you to any dates or anything. You're not a PM, right? But what do we got in the works for scanning other types of devices?
Absolutely. So, when we started the project for RAS, we spoke to, over 50 customers, getting feedback from them, understanding what their use cases were. And that was the reason why we chose Cisco and ESXi. Those bubbled up as number 1 and number 2. Past there, we had the use cases for database scanning, things like Oracle, Microsoft SQL. But then we look at things like Juniper as well. Juniper is going to be our next platform that we add support for. And then we look at things like Palo Alto, Checkpoint Firewalls, F5. RAS is something that we're committed to long-term. We understand that we want to be able to provide the capability to scan almost anything with a chip where we can. And so that's really the goal, is to continue adding support for more platforms and continue to add more functionality to the RAS toolset.
So next up then is Comply 2.12, right?
Yep, absolutely. And so with the Comply 2.12 release, as you mentioned, this week we got into our customers' environments in Tanium Cloud. Really excited to share some of these new features with customers. And in a way, I'm really more excited about what we've done in 2.12 than 2.11 because we've already added some enhancements to RAS. But in addition to that, there are some great new things from the standpoint of, giving users new capabilities for building reporting, new ways to get data out of Tanium with the export. We have new run-on-demand capability, right? Maybe you're needing to do an investigation. You can do a run-on-demand scan. You got a little checkbox there to run in and debug. That way you can get back more information about what's going on. And as I mentioned, the client extensions, or what we call CX integration, that first started out in 2.11 as well. And there's a lot of things that moving to the CX framework are going to allow us to do and build on. Things like investigative workflows, being able to track the actual versus expected state, pulling back, evidence for your remediation, understanding, more details into why an endpoint is vulnerable or why it is out of configuration. And then, moving forward past 2.12, we're excited about bringing things like CVSS 3.0 and exception management, simplifying the assessment workflow for our users. So 2.12 is packed with a lot of good things, but it's also a precursor to what's coming out, throughout the rest of the year and into next year as well.
Well, I've got to ask about scan on demand, because I know I personally voted for that with my customer because they said, hey, can we give like an IP or a computer name and just scan it? So is that what scan on demand does?
Yeah. So what scan on demand does, and I'll show it to you once we get into the console, but essentially say you've already created an assessment in your environment, it's running, and you want to investigate, an endpoint where, maybe you think you took the right remediation action, but it's still being run as shown as vulnerable, and you want to just rerun it on that endpoint. Now, most of our assessments, we have it set up to where it will reissue the assessment based on the Asia results. So for example, if your, organization requires you to do vulnerability scanning every 72 hours, Comply is smart enough to look and say, well, what are the age of the results from the last scan? And based on that, we'll be able to go out and do it. So what run on demand does is just at any point in time, I say, you know what, go ahead and run this now on the endpoint. I can even choose to do it on everything that I originally targeted at the assessment, or I could define a subset of those systems or just a list of individual endpoints to say, hey, go run this for me. And if I'm doing an investigation, run it in debug mode and give me back more artifacts for my investigation.
Man, that's just beautiful. I mean, I can only imagine that there are customers standing in their seat in front of their screen right now, just waving their hands and cheering, yay, thank you. Right.
Excited,
maybe not that excited,
honestly.
but that's what we get excited about here, right? Is making our customers happy. So let's dive right in before we run out of time. Let's go ahead and demo some of this. I'm really eager to take a look at it.
So I'm going to just run through some of the things that we've done here. And I'm actually going to start with some of the new 2.12 features that are, surfaced here in the workbench. One of the things that I really love with what we've done here in 2.12 is surfacing more data to the endpoint. And when I say more data, more meaningful data that can help them create, reports for specific use cases, tracking things based on specific applications, what we call affected products and affected platforms. So you're going to see here in our standard filter in 2.12, we've added some new fields. So CVEs, this is another pretty powerful filtering feature, which I'll talk about here in a second. Affected product and affected platform, those have all been added. And we also have a new filter builder feature. So for customers who are used to using our question builder, or if you've used threat response or other modules, you should be pretty familiar with this interface. And essentially what this allows us to do is to do even more advanced filtering. Say, for instance, I want to see CVEs that have been released in the last 30 days, right? Or I want to go based on the affected product or platform. So show me, vulnerability findings for my Google Chrome or Microsoft, Edge, right? I want to track all my Chromium-based browsers. So I know that, well, maybe I want to look at Edge and Firefox and Chrome all together. Well, I can do that now. And what's cool about this, when we jump over into all findings, a lot of these fields are now available for users as columns, right? So as I mentioned, we've got the CPE, affected product, platform, the created date, and all of this can be used to sort and filter your findings as part of your investigative workflow. So in addition to having these new fields here, and one of the things that I really do like about this, and I'll show you guys here, is that we have the download as CSV. I know this seems like a pretty simple thing, but when we had, we switched over to the findings view in 2.10, and a lot of customers like, it's great. I can create custom reports here. I can save them, all my filters and customizations. I just want to download that. We got that now. We've got download a CSV. You can pull it down compressed if it's a large data set. So we've got that now. That was a big one that, customers were asking for, and we're happy to deliver that. But again, with the advanced filter builder, not only do we have the ability to go after what we call, metadata or attributes of the finding itself, right? So all of this data, would be available to you from the flyout here. So when we're looking at our vulnerability, we can go to the flyout. We can see where we've got our vulnerability definition, the details there, and all of this stuff, again, has now been made available to us in our Connect plugin. So all of the new fields, if you're getting all of this data out through Connect, say you're sending it to your SIEM or your data warehouse, you can now do filtering around, your affected platforms, your CPE strings. All of that information is now available to you there as well.
Hey, I want to ask one quick thing. So I know I'm aware of this, but our audience may not be. Generally, Windows is the most common attack target. This is, but we can scan for Windows, Mac, and Linux, right?
Absolutely. Windows, Mac, Linux, and now with RAS, we add Cisco and ESXi. So we are expanding the capability of endpoints that we can go out and run these kinds of assessments on, which is really great.
Yeah, and that's important because no shop is purely Windows. So now we've got all these platforms. So as you're talking about filtering on platform, that means I can filter to, just the person that wants to see the Linux, for example, or the Mac. Maybe that's a separate team that's going to go remediate those things. So that's a really great filter ability.
And not only that, because these filters do apply to our Connect plugin, right? So if I'm someone who wants to get this data out, but it needs to go to different, system owners, maybe I got a Linux administration team and a Windows workstation team, any report that I create here, obviously I can apply the filters here, but maybe I just want to get everything. Give me all of the findings that I found across the environment. When I go to export that out and Connect, I can also just filter that by computer group to say, hey, give me everything for Windows 10. Let me send that to my workstation team, and they have that data and they can go and run with it. I'm glad you brought up the platforms as well. That's another thing in 2.12 that we add is we now have support for Alma Linux and Rocky Linux. So we're adding new platform supports. We've got vulnerability definitions that are already in our TVL, the Tanium Vulnerability Library, so you can start scanning those endpoints now. We're working on getting the Alma Linux benchmark certified as well. That's a new benchmark that we'll be adding for customers. We've got macOS 12 support now. So we've got, the macOS 12 benchmarks. And that's one of the things that from a content perspective, most of our customers today, they'll come in, they'll look at it and understanding that we are constantly adding more content. So new benchmarks, new vulnerability definitions. We update the TVL actually every 6 hours. So if you as a customer in your environment, if you're looking for, hey, I need the latest and greatest and I need it now, you can just come in there, hit update on the TVL. Normally in most customer environment, it's set to update every 24 hours. But from our standpoint, because we're working with a lot of content providers and we want to get this out to our customers as quickly as possible, when you've got 0 days and critical things in the environment, we've got that TVL coming out. And that's where we've got the vulnerability content or standards for Cisco and ESXi right now. That's going to be in the Tanium Vulnerability Library for unmanaged, right? So that's where all of our CVEs for ESXi, iOS, and all of the other Cisco flavors we support are going to be there. That's where you'll start to see all the Juniper content and other devices that we support for RAS will be in this unmanaged library. So really exciting there that we're adding that.
Hey, show us real quick, just in case somebody's new to Comply, where would they go to hit the do it now button? Give me all the latest.
Let's take a look at that. Yep. So for our client-based assessments here, you'll see that we have the run on demand scan. So run on demand scan, you go ahead and hit that. By default, it can go back out and it can just run the scan on the original group that you targeted it. But if you want to target it to a different computer group, or if you want to run it with debug and list a group of individual endpoints, you have that option here too. So you just do that, kick it off, and you've got that running in the background. Once it's done, again, your findings will update, but then you'll also be able to go in and pull the debug artifacts using what we call the Tanium endpoint must gather within client management. One other thing that we've got going on here as well, and this is something that we've kind of taken over from the risk module, is being able to multi-select findings to remediate and patch. So this is something that for customers today, if you're running Comply and you have patch module installed and configured, you'll be able to see where you have, patches that are applicable or ready to be installed. And we will surface that for you here. Now, what we are able to do now with the new capability here is you can select multiple CVEs to then go in and switch to remediate and patch. And what that then will do is move you over to the patch module, scope that down to the endpoints where you have patches that are applicable based on those CVEs that you selected. So this is a really powerful capability. Not only that, we can show you where you have the patch, if it's superseded, we can tell you when the patch was released, what the patch severity is. All of that will be available to you from the findings flyout when you access that information. So that's also a really powerful capability, especially for smaller shops where you've got folks who are managing both the vulnerability reporting and patch management. But even in larger organizations where that may not be the case and you've got separate teams who are doing it, it still does provide that information to me as the person reviewing the vulnerability in environments to know, hey, these are endpoints out here that have not yet been patched, and these are the patches that are needed for it. And I can pass that information on to the patching team as well.
Oh, this is fantastic. I can tell you guys have been putting a lot of work into 212.
Yeah, yeah. And the last thing I wanted to show you real quick here was the big change that we made to RAS. So again, we launched RAS in 2.11, and based on customer feedback and continuing to test and improve it, one of the things that we wanted to ensure that we could do is make the workflow as simple as possible for our customers. So one of the things that as I talked about, we integrate with the Discover module initially in 2.11. So you set up a satellite, you create a profile, and you tell that satellite, these are the networks I want you to go out and scan. And that scan is an Nmap-based scan, right? So what we're doing is we're doing an unauthenticated scan of the network to find devices and then be able to surface them as unmanaged assets in Tanium, which then you have the option to either bring under management, so you can push the client to them, or for the purpose of remote authenticated scanning, you can then scan those endpoints based on what has already been discovered. So what's really neat about this is that while we still have that capability, and there's a lot of things that I do like about using discovered endpoints, right? Because it gives me as much information as I can about the endpoints that I'm going to target before I target them with a scan. But in a lot of complex environments, right, you're not going to always have that information. Or from the standpoint of just simplicity, say, look, here's a CIDR range, here's a list of IPs. I've got a bunch of different things going on there. I just need to go run that scan. And that's where we added the ability to just target based on those IP addresses, right? So we support IP address range. You can do a CIDR as well. You can exclude networks as well. So if you know that, as I mentioned, the use case for VDI, for example, maybe you have, a couple of, subnets where you've got VDI endpoints, you want to target them, but you want to exclude some things as well. You have the ability to define all of that here. Everything else pretty much is the same, but just to recap, because I know we didn't really do one of these for 2.11, today we allow you to manage credentials. We use DEC, which is direct endpoint connection, to securely handle, encrypt, and pass the credentials down to the satellite. So it's not going through the whole linear chain. It's a direct one-to-one secure connection, and those credentials are never written to disk. One of the things we are excited to be bringing as well is PAM tool integration, right? So for customers who are using products like CyberArks or other PAM tools, to be able to integrate that as well. But today, you can utilize the Tanium Crypto Store and DEC to be able to do this, select your credentials, and then you can go out, select your vulnerability content the same way you would if you were doing a agent-based scan or client-based scan, right? So in this case, I can still go to my TVL for Windows or Linux, and then specify the CVEs that I want to scan. So if I just want to do a date range, 1999 to now, just go ahead and scan everything if I wanted to. I have the capability to set that up and then go ahead and set it up, schedule it, and run it. And one of the great things about once we have that data back, right? So we surface these in findings the same as we do for our client-based scans. So you can always just filter on your scan method, right? So we have client-based and remote authenticated. Here in this environment, I can go and I can look, I've been doing some testing in a larger scale environment here. So I got a /22 network, and, I've got, about 150 endpoints that I've been running scans on. So I've got all my vulnerable endpoints here. Again, these are endpoints that don't have Tanium agents on them, but we've run the assessment using the RAS-based scan, and the findings are here. We can filter them. It's the same data-rich information that's available. So when we pivot to the findings, again, we're able to access the same data out that you would for client-based scans. And this data is also available for you through the Connect export as well. So whether you're doing your unmanaged vulnerability scans, which are the Nmap-based ones, or you're doing remote authenticated scans or client-based, all of this data now is available to you in a unified form where you can get that out and provide it to the consumers of that data as you need to.
All right. So I've got a burning question then.
Yeah.
So we're doing RAS scans with a remote Tanium client that's been designated as a satellite. So it's the machine making connections to the other machines that are scanning. So we don't have to worry about for cloud customers, for example.
Yeah.
There's no cloud connectivity required. It's just a local Tanium client there. So could you talk about for just a second the network requirements for RAS to work?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up. We've documented this in our user guide, so we want to make sure that folks are aware of this. But obviously, so the scanning method that we use, and we're using the same Tanium scan engine, right? So the same engine that we use for client-based scans, we use for remote-based scans. So if I'm going to, a device that's, maybe a Linux box or, one of the hypervisors or Cisco devices, we're using SSH on TCP port 22. If I'm authenticating to a Windows device, we're leveraging Windows Remote Management or WinRM. That's port 5985, I believe. So again, that's also TCP port requirement. And so once you've got those ports open and your firewall rules in place to allow for them to get to them, obviously you need the routing from your satellite. So the satellite needs to be able to route to those IPs. And then we're able to go ahead and connect to them from the satellite based on the credentials that you as the customer provide. And then we can go out, run the scans, the data gets pulled back to the satellite itself, and then it gets consumed to the Tanium server. So you don't have to worry about these unmanaged assets, having to create, a bunch of additional connections. They're not trying to, connect to the Tanium server or anything. The satellite initiates the connections, runs the scans, pulls the data back, and then makes them available to the user.
So before we wrap up here, we're running close on time. I want you to talk to our viewers here about where can they get more resources on this? Where can they find out? I got an idea where you're going to send them, but I'd like to hear it from you.
No, absolutely. So obviously the Comply 212 user guide, which is up on our docs.tanium.com, is going to be updated with all the stuff that you need to know about the new features in 212, how to use them. We're also going to have a community article up once we get closer to shipping this on-prem. So again, we're in Tanium Cloud as of this week. We're going to be moving towards getting our on-prem customers up in the next week or so. So then we'll have a community article and we can get that shared with everyone. And obviously our product hub page as well, or product central on our community page as well, is where we have all this information, latest updates on Comply that our users and customers can get access to.
I love it. You were reading my mind. It's docs.tanium.com. It's kv.tanium.com for the release notes. It's community.tanium.com for the guides and the Comply Central. Every module has a page there that gives you all those resources. So Joel, as we're wrapping up today, anything else you want to share with people?
Well, I just want to say, I think right now, it's a really exciting time for Comply, because what we're really pushing this year and our roadmap this year is to continue to deliver valuable features and solutions to our customers. Obviously, as a software company, product quality is really important, and we want to make sure that, as we identify issues, we fix them quickly, and all of that goes into it. But getting user feedback is really important. And I think that's one of the great things about community, because not only can folks, post questions and comments, you can leave feedback there as well. And so as you, test out these new features, if you've got feedback on them, we absolutely want to hear it, because it's one of the big driving factors on not only what we do on roadmap and what we decide to do, but it really helps talking to customers. And, we spent a lot of times as we were building these features out, showing it to customers early when it was in development, getting feedback. And so I'm excited to see that we've been able to incorporate that customer feedback into the product to continue to deliver, a solid solution.
Wow. Again, it's a common refrain on this show that we ask for feedback and you give us that feedback and then we build it out. So that's what you're seeing today. Again, this is why I love doing this show, because we get to show people you asked for this, right? So the remote authenticated scanning, the scan on demand, all these features, the ability to export with so much more data and that enriched data going out through Connect as well to your other systems. These are the things you asked for and we've delivered them now. So Joel, thank you so much for giving us this tour of what's new in Comply 211 and Comply 212. And for those of you who are watching, remember that you'll be able to get all those resources. They're linked for you conveniently in the show notes here. And also, again, converge.tanium.com. Go ahead and get signed up now for this November, where you can get your hands on it in a lab environment that you can play with. And as Joel said, get us that product feedback. That's what we thrive on. Work through your Tanium representative that you talk to, and you can give them that feedback. You can post it in community, or you can simply email go@tanium.com, and we'll make sure it gets to the right people. So thanks again, Joel, for joining us today. And for you who are watching, hopefully you've enjoyed this tour of what's new in Comply. And until next time, go Tanium.